or Christian leadership is supposed to be perfect. There's no such thing on this earth as a perfect person. Just like there's no such thing as a perfect church or a perfect job or a perfect family. The only perfect person in this world was Jesus Christ.
Sure.
And we're called to mirror him and live a Christ-like life. But at the end of the day, we're all broken people.
What is up, friends? Rob here, and I'm back with a brand new Spitting Fire podcast interview for all of you today. And I'm with my man, Mr. Mark Cassara. Mark, will you say what's up to everyone real quickly?
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's a pleasure to be on this podcast today.
Well, I know Mark is going to spit some serious fire. Before we dive into that today, I always like to remind everybody why we do this podcast, why we interview leaders like Mark. It's because I believe, and this is how I live my life, by this mantra that we were all created on purpose, for a purpose. And I don't know about you, Mark, but I can't think of any better year than 2022 to start living on purpose. And here's the reality. If you're watching this or listening to this on the audio podcast, is that I believe there's a divine creator that put a leader in every single one of you. And I pray that something that Mark and I talk about today divinely inspires you to be that leader that I know your creator has called you to be. Now, Mark, I'm going to stop right here. And I make a joke about this in every podcast because every time I have a podcast, it never fails in Tupelo. We have a train that goes by about 50 times a day. All right. And so the train never fails me. You'll hear it in the background, but please ignore it. I just think it's a funny joke. But if you live in Tupelo, those that live in this area, they feel my pain. So, Mark, let's dive in just real quickly. And I always like to start by getting a 30,000-foot view of everyone's story. Can you give us a little bit of the background, maybe some of that transition time up to what you're doing today?
Oh, yeah, man. Where do I start? Yeah, if I could write a whole book on where I came from and where I am right now and where I'm going in the future, man. But, man, long story short, I came from nothing, absolutely nothing. I came from a broken family. Gotcha. My parents were teenagers when they had me. They went their separate ways. I lived with my mom for the first half of my life up until about 14, 15 years old. Then I moved in with my dad. My dad was a newly appointed pastor at the time. He graduated from seminary, came back to Connecticut to start his church, and got married as well. And so I moved into them at around 15 years old, started kind of that high school journey. And it was the first time in my life that I experienced stability, experienced, something that would give me the guidelines to become who I am meant to be in life, right? Living with a single parent, I don't know if people can relate, but it's kind of like a free-for-all most of the time,
sure.
Right? I was more of a friend. I was more of a friend to my mom than I was, than we had that parent relationship because we were just in survival mode. So long story short, we'll cut out all the middle pieces. I graduated high school and I asked my dad, well, what should I do? I can go into the Navy. I got some buddies that are heading to the Navy, or I can go into ministry. Yeah. And he didn't tell me what to do. But since he graduated from a seminary out in Oklahoma, he said, well, this is what you could do if you'd like. It's there for you. We'll help you get there. We'll help you take care of the tuition, or you can decide to go into the military. And so I had this like come to Jesus moment. I was like, all right, Lord, this is what I'm going to do. I went and took the ASVAB for the military. I passed it. The recruiter was like, Mark, you ready to get shipped off in 2 weeks? It was like that. It was crunch time, right? Yeah. And I said, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And I said, well, where's my life going to be in 10 years? Is it going to be in the military, or is it going to be helping people in a different way? And so I decided to go in Bible college. I went through 2 years of Bible college, became a youth pastor in my early 20s, came back home, and I was in ministry for years. I started as a front desk receptionist, working for my dad's church, and kind of worked my way up, and then became the youth pastor. I was youth and young adult pastor for 15 years with my wife. Wow. I met my wife during that time, out of college, kind of in ministry, and we led ministry. And then out of ministry, we felt the Lord calling us to a different place, just a different season of our lives. So we decided to head to Tennessee. We moved to Tennessee. We had a bunch of kids by then. When I say a bunch of kids, You'll get a kick out of this. We had a set of twin boys.
Wow.
After 7 years after we got married, my wife and I took a journey because we couldn't have kids. So we took a journey that direction. We had a set of twin boys. We did some IVF with our doctor, and so we went down that route. That was a whole nother a book that I can write. And then as our boys were turning 4, we wanted another kid, so we decided to go back to our doctor, and instead of one, we had 3 more. So we had a set of triplets after that. And all along, my wife had a young daughter that I brought on as my own. She was around 5 years old when we got married. So I had Alexa, then we had the twin boys, then we had the triplets. And so, man, our life has just been a complete faith-based journey from day one. Literally being born out of wedlock and living as a single parent household up until right now. We have never lost touch with our faith. Our faith in Christ has been exactly what has kept us grounded through the thick and thin, the ups and the downs, the forward and the backward. And so now currently we're 2 years into running our own financial firm. I know you've had my mentor and coach, Matt Sapala, on the podcast before. We're being coached, mentored by him and several other titans in the industry. Jesse and Cindy Moon are some of our personal friends and coaches and mentors as well. And so we're making our best life right now because we have such a large family. We knew that we needed to do something more than just work a 9 to 5. We needed to be our own bosses, set our own rules, set our own income level. And that's what we're doing right now. And so we're just scratching the surface, right? Even though we're 2 years in and we're making more money than we ever had in our entire life. Thank you to the Lord. We're just scratching the surface now. Because in our industry in financial services, we get to help people, and we get to make money while doing it as well. It's like we brought that 2 worlds together, and it's totally been a divine opportunity for us.
No, man, there's so much I want to unpack there in that intro, and thank you for sharing that. A lot of similarities too. I grew up with a single mom. I was the oldest of 4, so I had to become a man at the age of 8, 9 years old, raise my siblings. Same, my mom and I kind of, even today, I love her, but we're more of kind of like friends than we are, mother and son. And most of my childhood, even though I'm from Southern California, I spent it in Oklahoma. So some similarities there as you were talking about that. But let me ask you something, because I tell people there was a lot of things that really prepared me during that hard season when I was a kid, that broken home, single mom, single parent, time frame prepared me for now. There was also some negatives in my life that God had to do some things. But what was one thing from that time period, if you can remember back then, that really allowed you to be the man that you are today, that helped prepare you for some success?
Yeah. At an early age, I felt a calling towards doing something impossible, doing something different, doing something out of the norm. My friends growing up would always consider me the good boy because I never got into drugs. I never got into that whole lifestyle of usually what a single child would go through. They'd get into everything and anything, right? But for some reason, I stuck to myself. And at around 13, I went into a youth group one night, and I received the Lord that night. And it was a real decision that I decided to, I met him face to face. It was what I did. It wasn't my dad telling me what to do or my mom telling me what to do. And so it was from about 13 years old on that I knew I was called to be different and called to be kind of, set apart from the rest of the sheep, so to speak, for lack of a better term. Sure. And it was just my faith in the Lord, wanting to prove that I had what it took to live a life of, just a pure life, a life of holiness, and that's what I did. It was just holding on to my faith at a young age, reading the Bible, reading good books. And then I went to Bible college, and that kind of solidified my foundation even more. And I've been all over the world. I've traveled all over the world doing missions from a young age, from about 13 years old on. We've been everywhere to, from Haiti, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Colombia, India. I mean, we've seen some of the worst of the worst of the worst of humanity, but we've also seen some of the beauty that comes out of those places as well. And we've seen miracles happen. I've seen them with my own eyes. And because of that, you can never sway me in a different direction. I have my feet are firmly planted on what I believe because I've experienced it. I think it's just an experiential type of faith, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to unpack something there because, as you well know, it could have been easy for you just to start blaming and getting bitter and getting angry because I grew up this way. Unfortunately, I was a victim of child abuse, and my step parent, beat me and beat my mother. And I got angry for a season, but I had to get out of it. And Mark, I talk about this all the time, that I believe blaming blocks your breakthrough.
Mm.
Right. And so, this is what you're saying, that you could have went down that road, but you met God at an early age. Your faith became real. And it really just was that fuel that you needed to have that breakthrough to get out of that. But let's talk about this for a minute. There's so many Christians, and I'm not hating on Christians. I've been in ministry for a long time, former pastor, church planner, all the other pastor things you can think of in church. I've been those as well. But I see so many Christians that really just crumble in the midst of suffering. But there's nowhere in the Bible that I've read that Jesus gives us a get out of jail free card when it comes to suffering. Can you talk about some of those hard seasons, maybe even up into some of that infertility that you walked through, that you knew that your faith was real and that your faith sustained you? Can you talk about being a Christian, but also going through suffering?
Yeah, you see, part of my testimony of being kind of living that the life that's being set apart from the rest, right? So my mom, growing up with my mom as a single parent, she had a drug addiction, and she was an alcoholic. My whole entire life, I just remember so much love, right? But also those demons that were in her closet continually pulling her back. Rehab after rehab after rehab. When I was a 17-year-old teenager, remember driving to New Hampshire or Rhode Island. It was probably 4 or 5 hours away just to drop her off at a rehab center so that she can get better. But it was those struggles that I went through and my connection to God that kept me so kind of just on that path, because I never wanted to go down the wrong path. I always wanted to make sure that I was continuing walking forward and being faith-filled and keeping, Christ as the center of my life. So that right there really helped me kind of keep those blinders on, because I saw the suffering that my dearest person closest to me in my entire life was going through, and I didn't want to experience that as well. So I had a heart, I had that, that compassion for my mom. And, unfortunately, shortly after I did get married, my mom had a relapse, and she unfortunately passed away because, just some things happened. But, just living that and helping her through that process and praying for her.
Sure.
She received the Lord as her Lord and Savior.
Awesome.
I know that for a fact. So she's in glory right now. But it was just those hard years growing up as a young kid, seeing your mom just going through that type of abuse. And then, talking about the infertility, my wife and I were married for 7 years. Can you imagine, every single month, we tried to get pregnant from day one. Every single month, the tears and the sorrow and the sadness that would come over us, because it was like our future was being taken from us. We felt like we weren't going to have kids aside from our oldest, which was a daughter. But I always wanted a son, because you want the son to keep your name going, keep that legacy. And so we just stayed faithful, and we just stayed committed to God. We never blamed, and we never said, you're not giving us children, so we're not going to serve you, which some people go through. They go through that. I'm going to reject you because I feel rejected myself.
Sure.
We stayed faithful. And, we had some really close people in our lives when we finally had our twin boys say to us that we've gotten double for our trouble that we went through, where we got double for our trouble.
Good. Yeah.
And then furthermore, several years later with the girls that came, it was like, we considered that the above and beyond, right? The abundance that God wants to give us in life. He doesn't want any of us to suffer. He doesn't want us to suffer. He wants to give us an abundant life.
Sure.
And that's what we look at our kids as the gift that God gave us, because he wants us to be abundant in all areas of life.
Have you seen this in your own life, though? And this is something that I preach for years, that I believe God does his best work in us in the hard seasons. Like, I feel like I've learned the most, I've grown in my faith the most, matured the most in the hard seasons. Have you seen that in your years of ministry, but also in your own personal life?
100%. I did a recent post on Facebook, and the post was, I've come to realize, I'm going to paraphrase it. I've come to realize that without the trials, the troubles, the tribulations in life, there would be no growth. There would be no good times in life, right? So without the bad, without the things that stretch you in life, you won't go forward. You'll be stagnant. You'll stay at the same place, right? I also saw another post recently from one of my mentors. He said, the scariest place to be in life is where you were last year at this time.
Yeah.
Because there's no progression, there's no moving forward, there's no growth in your life. So I 100% believe that if there are no troubles, if there are no, things that are refining you and chiseling you and honing you in, then there is no growth in your life. So it's inevitable. Yeah. It's definitely necessary. It hurts, but it's necessary.
Yeah, and if you're listening or watching this today, listen, Pastor Mark just took us to church here. and I want to stop just for a second, and I want just to challenge you to quit hating on your season. You're in this hard season for a reason, and use it as fuel to grow, to mature, to get better, to become a better version of yourself, and quit blaming. Right. And quit hating and quit throwing shade. And listen, Mark's been there. I've been there. We've been through some tough things. And listen, I can't sit here and tell you that I've never blamed or got mad or gotten angry, but I had to snap out of it really quickly and realize that God was doing something in me. And I look back now and I go, oh, I see what you were doing. So I just want to challenge you, whether you're listening to this today or you're watching this on YouTube, to don't hate on your season, because I promise you there's a reason for it. So in all the years of ministry, Mark, that you've been in, the 15 years plus, what is one lesson that you learned from being a youth pastor and whatever other ministry you were doing that's prepared you for the financial industry that you're in today? Was there something that you learned there that goes, this has helped prepare me for success in this other industry?
I think the biggest thing from being in ministry and growing up as a PK, right? Growing up as a church kid, was realizing that everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has a story, and it's an individual story. It's a very specific story, and not two people are the same. So I relate this back to my life. The things that I'm going through in life, the perception that I'm seeing life through, that lens that I'm seeing life through because of what I've went through in my past, is not going to be the same lens that you're seeing life through.
Right.
We're seeing life through two different sets of lenses because we've experienced two different ways of life growing up. And it's the same thing with somebody that had a perfect life, that had everything given to them. Everybody has a story to tell. So I think the most important thing that I've learned from just life in general is listen to people's stories. Listen to them. Have an ear to listen. And my wife has taught me this more than anybody in my entire life. Empathize. Learn to empathize. Empathize is listening without reacting. Listening not to solve a problem, but listening because you want to hear the other person's side. So those are two biggest principles that I've learned throughout this journey called life.
Yeah, and I really like that you brought that up, because I have another friend of mine who's a motivational speaker, life coach, travels across the world, and he talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And he, sympathy obviously acknowledges, but he said when you empathize, you acknowledge and you get involved, right? You really lean into it. So I love that you talked about, that with ministry and learning people's stories. Why do you think so many people, though, because I've talked about this on my podcast before with other faith-based entrepreneurs, why do you think so many people are resistant to coming to Jesus, right? I know some have had bad experiences and there's some other things, but is there something that you think that, boy, this is really a challenge for Christians? Because a lot of times in industries, I hear people diluting their faith. I've never felt the need to do that, and have been successful, have plenty of friends, and even seen some of my people in the industry and other arenas come to know Jesus. But why do you think so many people are challenged with coming to God?
Yeah, I mean, even in my experience on social media, I've garnished quite a bit of a following on social media, and I'm not shy about my faith. As a matter of fact, I'm more bold now than I ever have been about my faith, and it's public and it's all over the internet, whether YouTube or TikTok or Facebook. And so some people love it and are attracted to me and want to do business with me because of my faith.
Yeah.
And then some people are, they don't want to do business with me. They don't want anything to do with me. They want to unfollow me.
Right.
And I've learned to appreciate both of that. You know, I'll pray for the ones that hate, pray for the ones that throw stones at me, and you know, I'll allow God to do their work in their life. But you know, you can't make everybody happy. But I think one of the things that really hurts Christianity as a whole is the notion that Christians are supposed to be perfect.
Yeah.
Or Christian leadership is supposed to be perfect. There's no such thing on this earth as a perfect person. Just like there's no such thing as a perfect church or a perfect job or a perfect family. The only perfect person in this world was Jesus Christ.
Sure.
And we're called to mirror him and live a Christ-like life. But at the end of the day, we're all broken people and we're all going to make mistakes. And the thing that hurts me the most is seeing, without naming names of ministries, but seeing these big leaders in these big ministries falling because of infidelity or whatever the case may be. It's painful because they've been raised in our society to such a high pedestal, almost as if they're a golden calf, almost as if they're an idol for people to worship. But at the end of the day, they're no different than you and me. They're no different than the guy on the side of the road. Although they're on a journey to try to live like Christ, they're imperfect. And our imperfections are always going to come out. And that's why we have God in our lives. That's why we have Christ in our lives, is to try to live better lives. But so I think that with the mix of social media and mainstream media and how fast information travels, that's been a big hindrance in the movement of Christianity, especially in Western America.
Yeah. And I love the fact that I say it this way: I'm not going to be everyone's flavor, and I'm okay with that.
Exactly.
Right. I'm a faith-based motivation, inspiration guy. I don't shy away from it. As you said, some people hit the unfollow button and the, you know, whatever other button and throw the other emojis up there. And some are like, man, thank you so much for sharing this. But for you, how did you get to that place where that didn't cause you to like retract from that, to run away from that? Because there's many people that want to start their own podcast, want to, you know, start posting on social media, but they're too scared to be the most authentic version of themselves. Can you talk about maybe some ways that you kind of broke through?
Yeah, and I'll be completely transparent and honest. There was a moment in my life where I lived in ministry. I was in the bubble of the church. I was engulfed in it. I was submerged in it. I knew nothing else but the four walls of the church. I worked at the church. We did ministry at the church. We ran a young adult ministry. It was 2 or 3 times a week we were there. But when you work for a church and then you go to that church and then your family is the lead leaders in that church, it's like you're in this. It's like you're separated from the world, right?
Right.
And so you don't know what's out there. You don't know, you know, unless you are very direct and you're very intentional about getting out there and experiencing people in the world. And it's just, it's a whole different way of living. And so I went from this period of 10, 15 years where I was in this bubble to being called out of the bubble. We moved to Tennessee. We moved our whole family to Tennessee. We've been living in Tennessee, you know, last 6 or 7 years. And so there was a moment when I experienced reality a little bit where I was like kind of thrown back, because when I did share my faith, there would be people that wouldn't agree with me or would try to come against me or whatever the case, because I had I got a secular job at that point. I was working in, in the industrial industry. And then I went to advertising and marketing. And so not everybody is Christian. And so when you come from working in the church that everybody's Christian to working in the world where almost nobody's Christian, or at least they don't admit it, it's like it's a shocking moment. It's like culture shock. And so I went through this like 1 or 2 year period where I was a little more reserved in my speaking out, a little more reserved in my living out loud type of faith. And then I came to this place where I moved from one job to another. And then I started my own business to become an entrepreneur working in the financial services industry. And I was like, wait a second, I don't have to shy away from this anymore. Right. I don't, what their opinion of me is not going to make any impact on my life. It's not going to make a difference for me going forward in life. So I'm going to be more outspoken. And so when I decided to take that step forward again instead of backwards, it was like God rewarded me in a way where more doors were open for me, right? More people allowed me on their platforms because I was more outspoken about that. But there was a little bit of a time where I was a little more nervous, more reserved to share my faith. I
Yeah,
didn't
no,
like that in my life, but it was there.
yeah, and I got to take a time out for a second. And once again, whether you're watching this or whether you're listening to this on the audio podcast, some of you aren't truly living on purpose because you're allowing the opinions of others to paralyze you. Those God-sized dreams in your heart that you know God has put in there, you're not living those out because you're too afraid what other people are going to think about you. And this is what Mark and I are talking about, is that you got to rise above that. And I have found, Mark, and I'd love for you to speak this just for a second. I have found that even with the passion and the boldness, that actually my haters respect me, whether they unfollow me or they throw some shade at me. They do respect me for at least standing up for what I believe in, that I'm passionate, that I'm no surrender when it comes to believing this way, just the way I respect them. If they're an atheist, agnostic, or whatever they are, I respect them for being passionate about their beliefs. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I do agree with that. There's something about being firm in your foundation in Christ or in
Sure.
any decision that you make.
Sure.
It's the ones that flip flop back and forth that
Yep.
lose the respect.
Yep.
It's the ones that are a Christian one day and then out partying the next day, and they don't know
Right.
which direction they want to go. They don't know
Sure.
which life they want to live. And so it says in the Bible that God will spit out the lukewarm. And I always had a fear of being lukewarm. And my dad said to me at the age of 16, he said, Mark, you're either going to be in or you're going to be out, but do not be in between, whatever you do. And so that stuck with me for the rest of my life. I was either going to be in or I was going to be out, but I was not going to be wishy-washy in between. So,
Yeah.
so yes, I've had people say, you know what, even though we don't agree, even though we have differences of opinion, I
Yep.
appreciate you for standing up and I appreciate you for saying that.
Yeah, no, I definitely love that. So when we talked on the phone a couple of weeks back and setting this up, you use the word reinventing yourself. You use this phrase. Talk about that. What does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah. My mentor, Patrick David, I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yep.
A lot of people who are listening to your
Yep.
podcast probably know him and Valuetainment. I've had the honor and the privilege of sitting under his mentorship for the last several years. And one of the things that he preaches, right? And we know he's not a preacher, but he shares through his messages his convictions. And one of his convictions in life on how to be successful and how to be a successful entrepreneur and a business owner and how to keep going forward even when times are changing is something called reinventing yourself. And reinventing simply means analyzing your life, taking a look back on your life, seeing what worked, what didn't work, and changing the things that didn't work so that it'll work in the future. And sometimes, especially when we had the pandemic, a lot of businesses shut down. A lot of businesses went under. A lot of, things happened, but it was the ones that pivoted, or we can also say reinvented themselves, that made it as long as they've made it up until today, right? So we look at companies like Blockbuster. Blockbuster didn't want to embrace digital or online movies. So where's Blockbuster today? They're gone, right? They're gone. Netflix kicked them out of the water. Netflix dominated the scene. Well, we look at other stores like, a couple of the toy stores like Toys R Us. They didn't want to embrace online sales. The culture shifted its focus from in-store to online, and those businesses that didn't want to reinvent themselves or pivot ended up losing in the long run. So that has to do with everybody's life. If we are not constantly reinventing ourselves, analyzing, evaluating our lives, and being better, then we're going to be left in the dust as well, whether it's through business or just in general.
Yeah, and I love that. And I love Patrick Bet-David. I read his stuff, watch his stuff. He actually came to a big insurance conference I was at 2 years ago and slayed it, man. It was awesome. But I love the fact that you talk about that because, to go from ministry to financial services, the financial industry, there's the haters, right? There's those that go, well, you just love money, or you just, you're all about money now. And what I have found for my life is that I actually shied away from money for a long time. And I don't know if anybody ever preached it from the pulpit, so to speak, but there was this unsaid thing about if you made money, you weren't as righteous, or you weren't as holy, or you didn't love God enough, or you were going to fall into all this sin and go buck wild crazy, and you were going to be a Christian gone wild, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember several years ago, I met a friend of mine who's one of my best friends today. And he said to me, and it's a piece of advice that I've shared on other podcasts, that when you're financially free, you'll actually preach the best sermons. And it hit me so hard that I had this 7-figure skill set that I believe God had given me, but I had downplayed it. My family and I went broke in ministry, pretty much. We were barely surviving. And then it just hit me. The light bulb went off. And I go, what am I doing? God gave me this skill set. I'm going to be responsible for this skill set. He's asking me to be a good steward, a good manager of this skill set. Can you talk about that? Because I know you probably experienced that as some, is why so many Christians are challenged with the idea of making lots of money.
Oh, that's so good. That's such a good topic to touch on, man. At the end of the day, for me, I found that money's a tool. And with more money, you can use that tool to reach more people.
Right.
At the end of the day, being a giver is not necessarily just giving to the church, but it's helping others. It's helping do further the kingdom of God, in the world, right? Through missions and through different organizations that are doing different things. Money is not the root of all evil. It's the love of, the lust of, the obsession of money, wanting more and more and more for your own greedy desires. That is the root of all evil. But money is a tool. And I heard a awesome good friend of mine, also a preacher. He said to me once, Mark, he said, a rich man can reach both a rich man and a poor man, but a poor man can only reach a poor man.
Yeah,
because the rich man has money, he can reach both the rich and affluent and the poor. But if you don't have money, nobody's going to take you serious. Nobody, and maybe that's not the right thing to do, but that's just that's life, right? That's life. A poor man will only be able to reach a poor man. And that's a hard pill for some people to swallow, right? Because they, and this is where church has done maybe not the best job at presenting prosperity or abundance in the right light, because we have some of these, televangelists preaching about money, and it's so one-sided sometimes that they're leaving out the whole, they're leaving out Christ, they're leaving out, the Lord and what it's supposed to be about. But money's just a tool at the end of the day. And the more money that I can have, the more people that I can reach, the more impact I can have on humanity.
Yeah, and I've heard it said this way, that some people love money, use people. Some people, love people and use money, but the greatest leaders are those that use money to serve and love people, right? Like you use it for that tool, like you're saying. But here's the vision I have, and tell me if I'm a little cray-cray, I'm a little crazy out there. But I think of God raising up this army of kingdom entrepreneurs that fund the vision.
Oh, yes.
Right. That are entrepreneurs, that are forerunners, that are creating, because we were created to create. And so I'm thinking, man, there needs to be this new breed rising up in the church to fund the ultimate mission. And what's that? To bring glory to God while making an impact and serving as many people as possible. Right.
Oh,
do you kind of see that as well?
I love it. Listen, the vision that I see God raising up billionaires.
That's good.
I see God raising up billionaires, and those billionaires having a everlasting impact on humanity, literally changing the face of time. And I see that because it's about the kingdom of God. See, the kingdom doesn't mean the church.
That's right.
The kingdom is all of humanity. The kingdom is so much bigger than what people think the kingdom is. And when God says go and make the kingdom and expand and duplicate and multiply, he's talking about business, finances, schools, the medical system, the medical industry. He's talking about every facet of life that he wants to expand his kingdom. And that's why we need kingdom entrepreneurs in every area of life. I tell my kids, I got my twin boys are 10 years old. My triplets are 6 years old, but I'm talking more to the boys right now because they're growing up and they're a little more
Sure.
kind of aware of life. And I'm telling them they don't have to just be a pastor. They don't have to just be a preacher to be in the ministry. That they can literally be out there and be a garbage truck driver or an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, and they can still be in the ministry preaching the gospel and furthering his kingdom. So I think the kingdom is so much bigger than what people think. I think we need to begin to expand the kingdom more and more.
Yeah, and I definitely, love that ministry is not what we do, it's who we are. Right?
Exactly.
It's in our DNA. And I truly believe this. I love John Piper, who's been one of my favorite pastors. He says that God is most glorified in us when we're most satisfied in him. And when I look at that, I go, when am I most satisfied in God? And that's when I'm living on purpose for him and I'm serving others and making an impact. I feel like I'm bringing him the most glory in and through my life. You talked about mentorship briefly. How important has that been to your success that you're getting today?
Paramount to my success. It's non-negotiable.
Mm,
Every man needs a mentor, and every man needs to be a mentor. Even the shyest of men, and I say men and women, but even the shyest person can still coach, guide, mentor, give advice to somebody. So my dad preached early on in my life that, Mark, you need a mentor. If it's not me, it's got to be somebody else, but you need a
sure.
mentor. And so in business, it's just as important. I've shared on social media before, stuff about my mentor or mentorship. And I've had people in my comments, thousands of comments, thousands of shares. And a lot of the comments say, well, if you're so successful, why do you need a mentor? And
Right.
my answer is shocking to them because everybody needs a mentor. Even the most successful person in the world needs a mentor because when you become autonomous and you're just a one person show, that becomes dangerous. That's
Mm,
when you can go
wow.
in some crazy direction. Everybody needs a mentor. And I believe everybody needs to learn to mentor people.
No, and I love that you brought that up because I believe, my story is very messy. I'm embarrassed to say that, but I've had some big failures in my life. And I look back and I go, the biggest failures that I've had in my life had been when I've gotten away from that accountability with mentors, that community to
That's the
mentor
word
them.
right there, accountability, because
Yeah.
accountability comes with mentorship. Without mentorship, there's no accountability.
Yeah. No, so I'm glad you touched on that real quickly. I think this often gets overlooked, but it goes along a little bit with that mentorship. How important has it been to have a supportive spouse, a spouse on this journey with you? Talk about that for a second.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, without a supportive spouse, life is not fun. Life is
Mm-hmm.
not fun. When I first got into business, one of the main questions in our, we call them a recruiting interview because we're
Sure.
recruiting, train and develop new people in the financial services industry. But one of the first questions that we ask in our recruiting interview is your spouse on board? Is your spouse supportive?
Right.
And if we find out early on in the relationship that the spouse is not supportive, we know it's a matter of time, 30, 60, 90 days, that person is no longer going to be in business with us. So to have a supportive spouse, whether in ministry or business or just in life in general, makes or breaks your life. It makes or breaks your life. And I'm so glad that my wife has been a supportive spouse to me because without her support, I don't know where I'd be today. I'd be on the side of the road somewhere. I don't know. I don't like to even imagine what I would be like right now if I did not have the backbone of our family, the backbone of our ministry, the backbone of our business, and that being my wife. If she wasn't supportive to me, I don't know where I'd be.
Man, that's powerful. And as we close here in just a few minutes, I want to transition a little bit about leadership and then talk a little bit about where we can find you as well. What is another core value? I know your faith is a core value because we've talked about that extensively, but what is another core value that Mark lives by?
In our family, it's respect, right? Respecting one another and respecting others outside of our family. Uh, Always holding respect in somebody else's life. Never disrespecting somebody. Just honoring people, respect, honor, And then integrity is our three core values in the Cassara household: respect, honor, and integrity. And having integrity is, even when doors are closed, still doing the right thing. And I've been instilling that into my kids, and they know, and we have a very open relationship. They know they can come to us anytime they want and tell the truth. They're going to get rewarded for telling the truth, and that they always have an open door policy in our home. So I'd say our three core pillars are respect, honor, and integrity.
No, that's great. And as a leader, as you're leading people, right, you're being led, but as you're leading, what is one leadership principle that rises to the top that you go, this is what I've been intentional about cultivating in my own life, and I live, but I also lead others from? Is there one that rises to the top?
There's three. And okay. I say three because they go together.
Sure.
And this has been big in our new journey in life, in being entrepreneurs and being faith-based entrepreneurs. It's the people that you surround yourself with. Okay. People that you surround yourself with. Sometimes in life, you'll have to cut away some of those dead branches. Yeah. You'll have to cut away the people that are weighing you down, because you're not going to be able to produce the fruit that God needs you to produce in order to impact humanity, right? So it's the people that you surround yourself with. It's the books that you read. I believe reading is a key attribute to leadership. If you're not reading, you're limiting your potential in life, because reading is the number one way you gain knowledge and understanding. Sure. And that goes along with reading the Bible and reading the Word as well. But reading in general, and then the events that you attend. The events that you attend in business or in church or in just life, events are super important for you to attend, because it gives you the ability to rub shoulders with other people that are like-minded and that want to do what you want to do in life.
No, I would agree with those three. And I want to go back to the first one about community, because, there again, if you're watching this today and you're faith-based, you go, boy, Rob just sounds like he's throwing a lot of shade. I'm not, I promise. But I get a get out of jail free card a little bit, because I've been on both sides. But what's so interesting to me is people go, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus cut people off? It would, that's not very nice of you or whatever. But I always tell people, it's not that I'm cutting people off because they're bad and I hate them and I don't love them and they don't love Jesus and they're not going to heaven. It just means in this season of my life, they don't get VIP access.
There you go.
Right? They get the nosebleeds for this season.
Love them from a distance.
Right. And so you've seen that in your own life, but how have you responded to that when people have told you that?
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? It's not that you hate them. It's not that you dislike them. It's that in order for you to move forward in life, you have to make sure you're intentional about who you surround yourself with. And another principle that I learned from, my parents early on, were the 5 people that you spend the most time with, you're going to become the average of them. And I tell that to my kids. I learned it as I was a kid. I'm telling it to my kids now. It's a little ironic that I'm actually doing what my dad did for me now. And I get a little freaked out as I'm going through life. And I'm like, wait a second. Just not too long ago, my dad was telling me this, right? But it's, you become the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So even family members, right? If you have somebody that's always just down and just complaining and negative. Early on in youth ministry, we gave an example. We put a student on a chair and we had somebody try to pull the student off the chair. And it was super easy to pull them off the chair. And then we asked the student on the chair to try to pull them on top of where they were. And the principle goes, it's easier to pull somebody down than it is to pull somebody up, right? So what do? We pray, we give, guidance, but that's all we could do. At a certain point, we have to cut that relationship off, or at least distance yourself and set up a little bit of a boundary around you so that you can focus on the things that you need to focus on and you can try to get ahead in life.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about that. And if you're watching this again or you're listening to this, listen, that next level that you're wanting to go to, you can't, because you got all this weight from the community that you hang out with the most. You won't make the hard decision to cut some people off, and not in a bad way, not that we don't love them, as Mark and I have talked about, but simply they're dead weight for this season in your life. Right? They're going to heaven. They're going to be there too when you get there. But for this season in your life, God has something different from you. Don't be scared to take that honest audit of your circle and make the necessary changes. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I ask everybody that comes on the podcast this question. If there was one word you could use to describe yourself, what would that one word be?
Oh man, one word to describe myself. Uh, a servant.
A servant. So tell me how being a servant has contributed to the success that you have today.
Well, number one, I'm a servant to the Most High. I just want to
Sure.
do His will. I want to live the best life that I can and impact as many people as I can. But in ministry, I mean, in ministry, that was ministry, but it also translates into business as well. I want to serve my clients. I want to listen to their story. I want to help solve their problems. And when I'm leading my family, I want to be a servant leader to my family. I want to lead them. I want to lead them from the bottom, pushing them up rather than me standing on top, trying to direct the boat. I want to be that captain of the ship that's rowing with my family to go to that place that we need to go to. So, if I had to just put one word on it, I want to be a servant. I want to be a servant leader.
Yeah, and I love that because I would love for you to speak to this just for a second, but have you found that when you focus more on serving than just selling, right? That servant leadership has substance and depth to it, where just like anybody can sell, right, so to speak, but really being that servant leader has depth, has substance to it. And what I have found is that when I focus more on that than just selling by itself, just for money's sake, that actually I'm blessed with more income. Have you seen that in your own life?
100%, 100%. So we've recently gotten an award for being one of the top producers in the company, multiple months in a row. And myself and my coach, we're currently top income earners, top producers in our company. But our philosophy, and I think that's a key to our success story, is serving our clients rather than selling to them. I don't ever want to go into a transaction selling the goods that I have. I want to serve them by educating them and allowing them to learn about the benefits that these services or these products are that I'm offering them are going to have in their life. So yeah, servitude, I guess it would be called,
Yeah.
a key component to being a killer in business.
Yeah. And what Mark is saying today is that the more impact you make, the income will be there. That's what I have found true in my own life. But too many people focus on the income without the impact.
There you go. I
Right.
love
And
it.
so I definitely love what you're saying there. So let's transition as we get ready to close shop today. Is tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel, your TikTok. I know you do a lot of financial literacy, but what is the goal? What is the mission with those outlets?
Again, social media I use as a tool, right? Tool to serve, serve the community and to spread awareness and to educate as many people as possible. I have a TikTok. You can follow me on money.smart is my TikTok handle. I have about 600,000 followers on there. A lot of just financial, financial literacy, financial education videos. Instagram is money.smarts with a Z. And then you can find me on YouTube, my name, Mark Cassara, and you'll see a big banner, Money Smart. And then lastly is on Facebook. Listen, over the last 4 months, I don't know what the Lord's trying to do, but I've went from 2,000 followers to about almost 1 million followers on Facebook.
Wow.
I kid you not. A couple videos that I posted went uber viral, 24, 48 million views on several videos that I have. And I think I prayed for this a long time ago. I said, Lord, give me a platform where I can liberate people, where I can share with people, where I can give back, where I have a place that I can help elevate people's lives. And I think this is the Lord giving it to me. I think this is the platform that God has called me to use, social media, to number one, not be ashamed of the gospel and to preach that message, but also to share with people tools that they could use to level up in life and become better people.
No, and this was coming to my mind as you were thinking. That's so good as you were talking about that. Do you think so many people want the platform or the position without being prepared first? Don't you kind of see that different in our culture where you're talking about, I prayed, right? I was getting prepared when I was preparing. So when my number was called, I was going to be a good steward of that platform, right? That's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Same thing with pastors and pastoral leadership, right? So many people want the platform, but they don't have the preparation. They're not ready for it, right? And then when they have it, they crumble and fall. It's the same thing with social media and in the influencer culture, right? So many people want the platform, but they haven't really gone through the boot camp in life in order to have a sustainable platform, or in order to lead the right way or influence or impact the correct way. And so I just pray that the Lord keeps me humble, and that I'm just able to serve the community, and I'm able to give back, and that my platform continues to grow. And as my platform continues to grow, the gospel is shared to more ears and eyes and hearts, and financial literacy is mixed in there as well.
So as we close today, let me ask you this. Give some advice to those that are listening, to those that are watching. Maybe there's someone out there who believes they have a message, but for whatever reason, fear has crept in. For whatever reason, some hate, some shade thrown their way, so the opinions of others, imposter syndrome, and there's so many things we could name, but they're holding back that message. If you could just speak directly to them today, what is some advice you'd give them to break out of that, to start sharing that message with the world?
Yeah, for one, you'll never get rid of imposter syndrome. I think the highest of people in our society deal with imposter syndrome. Yeah. I know influencers with tens of millions of more followers than me that deal with imposter syndrome.
Sure.
So you'll always deal with imposter syndrome. I think that's just us in our fallen state. We're always going to feel like we're not good enough. Like we're not, we don't have the message that people want to hear, that who's going to care about what we have to say.
Yeah.
Even when I have 1 million followers on Facebook, I feel the imposter syndrome creep in all the time. But I will say, if you feel afraid, Joyce Meyer came out with an awesome book years ago that says, Do It Afraid. It was a little mini book. And it's a book called Do It Afraid. And it talked about her being fearful of the next steps in her life. And she has an international ministry right now.
Right.
But she did it even though she was afraid, because she trusted that the Lord was going to take her to where she needed to go to. So if you have fear out there, guys, if you're letting fear hold you back, I think that's a sin, right? Because you're limiting your potential, and God created you with unlimited potential. He's the creator. He created you to create. So if you have that burning desire in your heart to create, whether it's a podcast or it's video series or it's a course or it's starting a business or starting a ministry, whatever the case may be, if you're being held back and you're not moving forward in your God-given talents, I feel like we're sinning against God when we do that, because he gave us those tools for a reason. So guys, if you have that fear, do it afraid. Keep going forward. And I think this, I'll close with this idea of an arrow. In order to hit the target, arrow has to be pulled back and stretched. And once the arrow is released, then it goes through the air and it hits its target. So sometimes we're going to be pulled back in life in order to be sprung forward.
Man, gosh, that was like lightning round spitting fire right there. I appreciate you sharing that, and all of your social media links. We'll make sure to post that in the video description when this drops in a few weeks. Definitely going to post that book in the video description as well. Would love people to pick that up. I know that could be a catalyst for some to break out of that. Man.
Oh, there's one more book I recommend is Matt Sapola just came out with a book. He's he's going to be a best-selling author. His book is called The Faith Made Millionaire. Yeah. And it's available on Amazon as well. So that's definitely a book I'm almost finished with. I recommend anybody that has a desire to go forward and do their thing in life to read that book for sure.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely put that link in the description too. And I want to pick that up. And it's interesting you talked about the imposter syndrome, because I was watching a podcast by one of my favorite podcasters, Ed Milet. Yeah. And he talked about, even he at his level, the fastest growing, motivational podcast on the planet, that he even deals with a form of imposter syndrome. So it's interesting that you brought that up. And as we close today, I knew Mark was going to over deliver and bring some value, and I pray that all of you were blessed today. But I do this because maybe some of you are about to quit. Maybe some of you are about to give up, and I call it putting fresh wind back in your sails. I just pray that there was some fresh wind put back in your sails, and that you were reminded today that you were made for something, that there's purpose inside of you, and that you were created on purpose for a purpose. As always, if you're listening to this to the audio version, please leave us a review. Share this with somebody who needs to hear this message today. If you're watching from the video on YouTube or wherever, please like, comment, subscribe below, turn on the notifications. That way you're notified every time we drop fresh content like this. And once again, share this with someone who needs to hear what Mark was sharing with us today. And I'll just close by saying, God bless all of you guys. Keep living on purpose, and we'll talk to you soon.
Amen. God, guys.